For years now, we Indians have been told that our economy is booming. The world's fastest growing major economy, the bright spot in a slowing world. And despite unemployment, weak private sector investment, and stagnant wages, the official message as of 3 months ago remains the same, that everything is under control. Then suddenly, the Prime Minister came out asking people to use less fuel, avoid foreign travel, stop buying gold, and cut down on chemical fertilizers. Fuel prices were hiked, import duty raised, and more measures are likely to be announced. That shift in the tone raised many questions. If the economy was fundamentally strong, why is the government suddenly asking citizens to cook with less oil or postpone the foreign holiday? Could just the ongoing US-Israel-Iran war have caused it? Look, the reality is this. This crisis did not begin with the war or the Strait of Hormuz disruption. The war has merely exposed the fundamental weakness that already existed and which the government failed to tackle or even acknowledge. Let me explain. Now, before we go into all of that, let me remind you, India's economy is much more than stock market numbers or GDP headlines. The real story lies in wages, jobs, small industries, and everyday pressure people face long before a crisis. At the News Minute, we believe these issues deserve deeper scrutiny. This is why we look beyond the headlines and break down exactly what's happening, like I'm doing right now. If you value our work, then support my show. You can scan the QR code and contribute to Let Me Explain directly. And let me also tell you that Let Me Explain has moved closer to you because we have a WhatsApp channel where you can exclusively access our behind the shot videos, small explainers, recommendations, and much more. Even before the Iran-Israel-US war began, the rupee had started falling. Foreign investors had been pulling money out for months. Exports were slowing, worker wages had stagnated, small industries were struggling. And beneath the headline GDP numbers, there were signs that India's economic growth story was becoming increasingly uneven and fragile. The West Asia crisis simply exposed these vulnerabilities all at once. To understand what's happening right now, you need to start with India's dependence on imports. India imports roughly 85% of its crude oil requirements. It also depends heavily on imported LPG and fertilizer inputs. So when oil prices spike globally, India immediately feels the impact across the economy. Economist Neelkant Mishra estimates that every $15 increase in oil prices costs India nearly 1% of our GDP. That's not a minor shock, it's the kind of increase that can slow growth across multiple sectors all at the same time. And higher oil prices create another major problem for India. The country suddenly needs far more dollars to pay for imports. That's where the rupee crisis comes in. Rupee has fallen to 96.3 per US dollar. And there are fears that it could weaken further if oil prices remain elevated. But it's also significantly fallen against Sri Lankan and Pakistani rupees and Bangladeshi taka. But the important thing here is that rupee's decline did not begin after the war. It had already been weakening steadily for months because foreign investors, like I said earlier, were pulling money out of Indian markets. Now, why were they leaving? Partly because global investors were moving towards sectors linked to the semiconductor and AI boom, especially in countries like Taiwan or South Korea. But there were also India-specific concerns. Indian markets were seen as expensive relative to other emerging economies. Corporate earnings growth had slowed. Exports were weak. Consumption demand outside the top income groups was sluggish. Former RBI Governor D. Subba Rao recently warned that India is beginning to resemble the conditions seen during the 2013 crisis, when emerging market currencies crashed after global investors pulled the money out. The danger in such situations is not just economic fundamentals, it's also market psychology. Once investors believe the rupee will continue falling, panic starts settling in. Exporters delay bringing dollars back into India because they expect the exchange rate to worsen further. Importers rush to buy dollars before prices rise more. Investors hedge aggressively. Households begin buying gold and dollars as protection. At that point, fear itself starts weakening the currency further. But many economists now argue that India entered this crisis already vulnerable. Ex-IMF economist Surjit Balla recently made a striking point. He said that even Indians no longer appear enthusiastic about investing in India. And while headline GDP numbers still look respectable on paper, critics argue those numbers are hiding a deeper structural problem inside the economy. India's growth has become increasingly unequal. Some economists describe the post-pandemic recovery as K-shaped. This means in a recovery after a crisis, some people and businesses recover faster, while others keep struggling. So the economy improves but unevenly, with winners and losers at the same time. Now, wealthier Indians recovered quickly after COVID because they benefited from stock market growth, financial assets, and corporate profits. Meanwhile, lower income groups face stagnant wages, insecure employment, and rising living costs. India's own economic survey acknowledged that real wages for regular workers have actually declined over the past few years. Rural wages have either stagnated or weakened since the pandemic. That means millions of Indians entered this crisis with very little financial cushion. Now add inflation, fuel price hikes, and slowing economic activity to that situation. The pressure becomes severe very quickly. The sectors feeling the impact most immediately are MSMEs and small manufacturers. There are already reports from industrial belts around Delhi, Noida, and Gurugram of workers quietly returning to villages because factories are slowing production or shutting down operations temporarily. Even before the war, worker protests had already increased across industrial belts in Bihar, Haryana, and Uttar Pradesh. India's economic survey had acknowledged wage stress. Export weakness had already been flagged repeatedly, which is why critics say the government's response has come too little, too late. The West Asia crisis began months ago. Oil prices had already started climbing. The rupee was already weakening. Yet, public messaging from the government remained largely optimistic until the assembly election results were announced. Only then came the appeals for austerity. The measures announced so far include raising duties on gold and silver imports, increasing LPG and CNG prices, signaling future fuel price hikes, and asking citizens to voluntarily reduce consumption. But many economists argue that these measures are reactive and not strategic. They may temporarily reduce pressure on imports or government spending, but they do not solve deeper structural problems. The government now also faces a credibility crisis. As citizens are being asked to reduce fuel consumption and avoid unnecessary travel, political campaigns, roadshows, and large public events continued uninterrupted throughout the election season. Austerity appeals work when political leadership itself appears visibly restrained. India now appears to be caught between two competing pressures. On one side, the government wants to control the fiscal deficit and reassure financial markets. And on the other, it also needs to protect households from rising fuel, fertilizer, and food costs. If the government cuts spending too aggressively while the demand is already weak, the slowdown could deepen further. People spend less, businesses earn less, factories slow production, layoffs increase, consumption weakens again, and investors will find it even more unappealing. That cycle can become very difficult to reverse. India still has substantial foreign exchange reserves, close to $700 billion. But as Subba Rao warned, reserves alone cannot guarantee stability if investor confidence weakens rapidly. And that brings us to the bigger question underneath this entire crisis. has India's economic model been framed. For years, India's GDP numbers have been growing. The stock market has been booming and wealthy urban consumers have been spending. But manufacturing jobs did not expand at the scale required for India's population. Informal unemployment remained widespread, wage growth weakened, and economic gains became increasingly concentrated. This means the gap between the haves and the have-nots kept increasing. As long as global capital kept flowing into India and oil prices remained manageable, these weaknesses were easier to ignore. Now both these conditions are under stress simultaneously. So how long could recovery take? That depends mainly on oil prices, global financial conditions, and the government's policy response. If the West Asia conflict relieves stress on Hormuz and oil prices fall below $90 a barrel within the next few months, India could stabilize over the next 1 to 2 years. But if oil prices remain over $100 for an extended period, the situation becomes much more difficult. A global slowdown would make recovery even harder because India would then face a dip in demand for its exports combined with continued capital outflows. India is not on the verge of collapse. It still has significant strengths, including a large domestic market, strong services exports, and substantial forex reserves. But this crisis is exposing the gap between the headline growth numbers and the underlying reality of our economy. Because an economy cannot remain stable indefinitely if there are not enough jobs, wages stagnate, small industries weaken, and growth benefits only a narrow section of the society. And that is the real warning emerging from this crisis.